Hello everyone. This is our second video of our two-part series on these or that games. In this series, we'll go over different types of these or that games, how to build one on Metaspark, how you can integrate an this or that game in an event or project you're already working on, and tips or tricks on how to work on more complex Metaspark networks. In this video, we will developing a more complex version in which, depending of the answers you choose, you get one of two answers. So let's get started. If you haven't checked the first part, go back and check it out. We'll be using a lot of the tools that we developed during that first part and this part. And so go back there and then you can come back and continue in this one. If you did check it out, let's do a quick recap of what we're doing. The first part of tutorial, we created a basic this or that game in which no matter the decision, you always got the same end card. And we talk about how this type of game is amazing to create awareness. For example, if you're working on an event, it's amazing before the event to create awareness, to create a sense of like, this is what is going to be on the event. And like, let people know like, oh, I didn't know these were all the possible options, but it's more to create a conversation. It's among peers and like, it doesn't give you any specific results. What we're going to create now is a more complex this or that game in which, depending of the answers you choose, you do actually get a different answer. And this is better when you already have awareness of the event and you're trying to jump more into the educational part of it. So for example, knowing like, hey, what should I do today? Should I go to the pavilion or should I go to the gallery? This is an excellent example of something you can include in an already like developed event to include as a promotional extra thing that is super cool to reach out to the audiences inside and outside the event. And so let's get started. Unlike other times in which we start with a blank project, we're going to continue where we left last time. We'll be using the same project we're using for the project one. So if you were following that tutorial, you can continue with your project. You can save as. If you did follow the tutorial, you would notice that something is happening in which we're getting that sound that shouldn't be happening yet. And we'll address that very quickly. Will we fix it? For now, I'm going to turn this off. If you downloaded the project from the YouTube channel, from the YouTube video, it's totally fine. You wouldn't have that issue. So, but before we jump into all that, I want to talk about project organization, because as we work in more complex patches, our project starts getting messier and we start getting something that looks like this. And, you know, this is not like easy or fun. And this is like, it can feel like hazard spaghetti. And it's like, oh, what's going on in here? I don't even know where to start. And this make it really hard to recover a project a year from now or 2 years from now if you want to do something similar. So let's talk about a little bit about organization. The first thing that I want to show you is clearly the map. It allows you to know where you are standing on your project. And this is super useful on like super long networks. As you work on projects, you start organizing things, especially. Personally, I like to have things like device inputs and trackers to my left side. And I start actually build it sort of like in a timeline. So the first thing that I need is on this side. Then I have the center of the interaction in here. And I usually have like end states at the end of my map. You can also do it vertically. But another thing that is super useful is commenting around. So you can select all your objects like this. And you can do two things. You can either right click and say comment around, and it creates this comment group, or you can do the exact same thing. I'm going to do this on this other group. I can just select, and if you see here, it says the shortcut, which is Meta, meaning Windows, or Command Alt C. So if I do Command Alt C, I have my other command group. Once I'm commented, I can like come in here and, you know, like change my comment, change it, put it like a name that I prefer. It could be, this is actually start state. So this is to start, and this is hit counter. And the last thing is feedback. These are all my visual and audio feedback. So I'm just gonna name this feedback. So like that, I have a little bit more of organization. And this is the first level. And this is like super useful. The other thing that you can do as you like work on this is that you can actually create groups. And let me actually put this down. I don't know what this is up here. What you can do is that you can start creating like groups, and grouping basically creates inputs and outputs. I like to keep things that go into my scene editor outside my group. Why? Because if I do any change of the scene on the scene, I don't have to go inside my group. So things that I know that I want to, for example, if I wanted to turn this off or like switch it, I want to make sure that this is outside my group. So I can, again, select everything, right click, and I can group, or Control G or Command G. And if you notice, this group already is created, and I can name this group Start. And if I click on this arrow, like these two arrows, I come back and everything is in here. And if you notice, I already have my inputs. And those inputs are precisely those two inputs that are in here. And I have two outputs that are precisely these two outputs that are here. If I want to, for example, change something on my group, I've been working on it and I realized that something, I want to add an extra input, I can come here to group properties and I can add extra inputs or extra outputs as selected type. Another thing that I can do, and this is really important if you're creating tools for other artists or you're doing this for yourself on the long term, and I love to do this, is actually name my input properly. So I know that my screen tab switch has to go in here, here. And I can put a description that allows me to know in, I don't know, exactly a year from now, what am I supposed to do here? I mean, this is a very self-explanatory. I should just put my screen tab here, screen tab switch. But this is a way of keeping your project very organized. You can also have a default value, and you can like change the names of inputs and outputs. And what is more interesting, and we can talk about that later on, is that you can even take these and convert it into a patch asset. And patch assets are assets that you can bring across different projects, and they are like completely self-contained. And that's one of the reasons why you want to make sure you keep your outputs and inputs separated, because there are certain things that you can include in patches. And if you add one of those things inside, meaning one of those outputs or inputs, things that are specific of the scene, you might not be able to create a patch. So that's just some cool knowledge to have. I'm going to go around and organize this network a little bit so we can move forward in a way that makes sense. Okay, so now that my network is a little bit more organized, I want to fix this little issue here very quickly. And if you notice, what's happening right now is that my audio is being triggered when my second input is less than 5. And it's always less than 5 if I haven't started the game. So I basically need to add a second condition that says not only less than 5, it also needs to be it has to start counting. It has to include the tab. So what I'm going to do now is another tool that I can use to keep my projects organized, and is using senders and receivers. A few tutorials ago, we used senders and receivers to use the delay patch. In this case, we're going to use senders and receivers as a way to keep our network organized. And we're going to use a bunch of those today. So the conditions that I want is that actually whenever my game state is on, that's when I want to take it. You know what I mean? So instead of like creating a whole thing in here, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to take these same conditions, because this matches all the conditions that I want. And I'm going to come in here, and in output, I'm going to drag my noodle to get the word, to get my receiver. So I have, my sender. So I get to set a sender, and this sender by default, it says number. I know this is a Boolean. It would adapt it no matter what. But like, just to make sure, I'm just going to put it, and I'm going to rename my sender to game start state. So like that, I know that this sender is sending the game start state. And now I'm going to come down here where my audio patch section is. And between these poles and my or, I'm going to add an and, because these two conditions, any of these conditions are met and I started counting, then we can start sending this audio. So I'm just going to connect this in here. this in here. And now I'm gonna right click in here and I'm gonna write receiver. And that receiver is the one who's gonna get the signal. I'm just gonna click in here on the little arrow and I get the name of the only sender that I have, that is game start state. And if I put it in here, now the two conditions are met. If I turn on my audio, I will notice that actually it doesn't activate anymore because I haven't started the game. So let's check this very quickly again with my split cam. You see, nothing is happening because only one condition is met. But in the moment I go here to my three dots, simulate touch, click, it's different. It starts activating. So that's it. Perfect. Let me get back to here. So that's like a quick fix if you were following and you were having issues. If not, I actually added this on the file that is updated. I'm just gonna turn this off because it is loud. Okay, so what we have here is the working project, but what we wanna do now is we wanna create the logic that allows us to change our answer from thank you, nothing happened, to dog or cat. And to do that, we need to know which answers, whether it's left or right, works for one or the other. I already figured that out on my project before. Basically made it that in the question 1 and 3, left means cat, and 2, 4, and 5, right means cat. And so basically what I want to do is that I want to make sure that I'm only counting points to cat on the moments where cat is the answer, isn't it? So seems like I need to have both a counter, something that tells me, hey, let's add, but I also need something that only counts left leanings on the questions that I want that left leaning to mean something. So what I'm going to do right now is I am actually going to unplug this to just have a little bit more of organization in here, because I'm not going to use this for a while. And right now they are like on the way. I'm going to move this out of the way. And what I want to do is that I want to have an and. I want to have like, hey, equals. So whenever it's exactly, when I'm asking the question, exactly the question 1, and we are left leaning, here's the left lean. In that case, only in that case, I want us to give points to cat. The problem with this approach is that it's going to get a little bit messy because we have 10 different questions. We have 10 different answers, and each card needs to have its own value. So the best way of doing this would be using a sender and as a receiver, isn't it? So I'm just going to create here a sender very quickly. I select my option, my output. I drag it to create the sender. I'm going to rename this left lean sender. And now I'm going to make sure this is a bool. Same here. I'm going to create a sender, and it's going to be called right lean sender. And again, I'm going to make sure this is a bool. And so now that I have this, it's so much easier because I can actually just be like, hey, give me a receiver. I click on the middle to get my receiver. And I am connecting this receiver. And I want to make sure, you see, give me an error because my current receiver hasn't selected anything and it needs to be Boolean. And the default is number. So I'm just going to say, hey, left lean sender. And if I hit play, here it is, or problem solved. And I know that is question 1 and question 3, isn't it? So question 2. Let's go back and let's add the question 2. Same thing, same conditions. But when the question is 2, meaning question 3, I want also these to work. So I'm just going to add another and. And the beauty of this method too is that I can very quickly just plug in here. The other thing is, like, if I made a mistake by any chance, it wasn't the left, it was the right, I can just like really quickly change it in here. And so it is fixed immediately. I really like to use senders and receivers. Gotta be a bit, not sparse with it, but be careful not like start sending a lot of things across the whole network. But whenever you have like networks that get long, they are a lifesaver. So I just want to add here an or, because I don't care which of these is giving me the points. And it works. And what I want to do finally is adding a counter because I want my values to be added one after the other. And I'm going to do the exact same thing, but now I'm going to do it for the right lean center. So I'm just actually going to duplicate this whole thing because I know I'm going to need this and one extra one actually, because it's 5 questions. And given that I have everything on my comment group, I'm going to bring this down so I have more space. And I'm just going to plug this in here. And again, what I want to make sure is that the values that I'm comparing my questions are the values that I want. So question 1, which is question 2, question 3, which is question 4, and question 4, which is question 5. Here it is. And I'm just going to add a bunch of like OR chains, you know? So it could be either like this, these two, and then these two go to a bigger or I add them all into a little one by one. Let's see. Okay. So now I have this, and I'm going to put a quick value in here just to show. So what I have now is if I go to my own phase, which is the easiest to control, if I start my game, so if I select here, point for cats, and I select here. Oh yeah, my images are not changing because I unplugged them. But anyway, if I select here, this doesn't give a point for the cat because it was, or maybe it did. Let's see if this was a point for the cat. It wasn't a point for the cat. This wasn't a point for the cat. Was this a point for the cat? Okay, that was the end. But I got 3 points for cat, basically. And it's hard to see because we're not seeing the cards right now, but just to make sure it is adding only when I am on the right or in the direction that I told it to be. So now I'm actually going to just change this to do the same process, but I'm going to do it on the other side. So I'm going to change this from left lean to right lean. Oh, this is a real problem, actually. This is supposed to be right lean center. I'm going to change this to right and this to left, and those are going to count towards dog. So I duplicated this. I'm going to name this like cat answers. So it makes a little bit more of sense what I'm doing as I'm doing it, you know, cat. And I'm going to name this dog. So I also have a better sense of what's going on here. Dog. And as I said, I just want to change this to right lean and this one to left lean center. And so now I have this like value that keeps adding. I'm not going to need that value. But what I do want to do though is that I want to create, because I don't want to have the cat always or the dog always. It's saying like it's adding, but now I need to tell it, hey, if there's a majority of this, you want to show me that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to merge these two networks. The first thing that I need to do is that I need to make a greater than. So whenever I have 3 or more answers on one side, because it's 5 questions, that means that it's going to be positive. So the same thing I'm going to do down here. If it's 3 or more, it's positive. And I'm going to use something called the option center. So what I'm going to do, option switch, my bad. What I'm going to do right now is that I'm going to come in here, and option switch allows me to tell it, hey, so this option means output 1, and this option means output 2. So I'm just telling it, hey, so whenever I'm getting cats, then option 1. Whenever I'm getting dogs, then option 2. And do you remember how we did this with the option picker at the beginning? That it is either showing us this or that, or showing us the end. In this case, what we're going to do is that we're going to tell it at the end, don't show us the end, show us either cat or dog. So the exact same thing, I'm going to create an option picker. And I'm going to make this option picker a texture. So select down here, click down here, get texture. If I go into my settings, I'm just going to make 2 inputs because I only have 2. And I'm going to make sure that the first one is cat and the second one is dog. And I'm going to make sure that my output, instead of having to end, my output is going to be whatever happens on cat and dog. So that's great. Now that I have this, let me organize this a little bit even more. Because what I want to do now is the good old connecting all these together again. Like now that I have this, I can connect this again, and this again, and this again. And if I feel it looks too messy, I guess I could use a sender on this one. But for now, let's leave it like that. Okay, and if we try with dog, it would be bacon, I guess. Chocolate. Early bird. Swimming. Sandals. Dog. Even though I'm like, this is like working great, I don't like the way it's feeling when this starts. Like feels like they are a little bit too slow. So I have 2 options. I can either increase the delay, meaning how long it takes to show me the next card, because right now it feels like the star remains until the next one. So I could make these be 2 seconds, or I can make the time the star shows up a little bit less. That's another option. Let's see. Yeah, in this case, it is feeling better, but maybe let's just make this 1.5 and the card a little bit less of delay. It's like maybe too much. Like 0.6. Let's see how this feels. Let's try it. Better. Okay, so this is working. Pretty much this is what I wanted to do. If I turn on my sound, I also have the sound, so that's kind of cool. And depending on what are the options that I choose, I get a different result, and that's like a great effect. Another thing that I can do is maybe I want to change my input. And in this case, what makes the effect start is having the screen tap. Another thing that is very common on this type of effects is instead of using the screen tap, using something like on record. So you can like take your device, drop it in here, and then you can take your camera, drop it in here, and actually you start getting options like, hey, is it video recording or is the front camera active? So for example, if I were to turn this instead with this, what's going to happen is that only when my video is recording, no matter what I do, this effect starts working. So that's great, for example, if you want people to record the video and post it on social media. That's an option. You can add it to any sort of instructions, like a different moment. For now, I'm just going to keep it on the top because it makes it very easy to see it happen in real time. The other thing that we can do is that we can also change different inputs. For now, we're using the right lean, left lean state, but I could do something like using like face positions. You know what I mean? I could be like happy face, head nod, head like kissy face, smiley face. So I could change all this and maybe make it like whenever you smile, you add a point to this. Whatever you frown, you add a point to this other option. You can like really play with this and change it and change the results you want. After seeing this, I think you can get an idea of how you would build something like a tree option map with this sort of game. It can get very complex and you can do a lot of things. The last thing I want to talk to you about is as we make our projects more complex and the interaction more complex and more interesting, we also need to make sure our users know what to do and when to do it in our effects. And that's where instructions become critical. In this case, I use a simple tap the screen to start instruction on my like card that is on my starting card on the head. But if, for example, I wanted to add an extra instruction to indicate also the way you change and you select is leaning your head, I could use one of 2 methods. I could either come in here and like create a canvas and just create a 2D text. And this would be like at the forefront of everything. And I can write, hey, lean left and right. And that's fine. But if I come here on project edit properties, and capabilities, I find these instructions. What is so cool about the building instructions of Metaspark is that these instructions do change based on the language that the user has their phone. And that's super important when you have a global audience. If you are working, for example, an international conference or something like that, you want to make sure that every user, whenever they find your experience, they understand what's going on. So it is super good to use these instructions whenever you can. They have automatic instructions. And what those instructions do is that they detect what tracker you are using and they give a default instruction regarding that tracker. So in this case, probably it's using something like find a face, because I don't only want to find a face. I want to be able to have my leaning. I'm going to click on custom instruction. And if I come here on plus, I can find from a list of custom instructions there is available to select. And in this case, it's face tracking. And I know I want to do something like tilt your head from side to side to let people know like, hey, tilting is the way you want to do this. So I'm just going to come in here. I hit insert. And now I have this instruction available. However, if you notice, there's no instruction. If I come in here, nothing is happening. And my project contains capabilities that are not being used. That's because I haven't called my instruction. The way to do that is I come here in the middle of the patch editor. I am right clicking. I just find instruction, time instruction. And there's two types, the time and the conditional. The conditional, you would use it when you need certain conditions to happen. So for example, after you do the first round of left and right, something else happened, I will use the conditional instruction on that case. In this case, I just need a time instruction. It means it just happens after a certain amount of time and it shows for a certain amount of time. So I'm just gonna add this. And in the moment I do this, if you notice, I have the option. If I come here in option, I can select the instruction that I pick from the top. In this case, tilt your head from side to side. I want it to show for 5 seconds. And what I need to do now is that I want to turn on the show moment. The way to do that is what I'm going to do is going to tell it, hey, the first 10 seconds of the effect are like free. That's the time where I want you to show it. So I'm just going to come here. I'm going to hit right runtime. And this is the time of seconds since the effect is started. And what I'm going to do is that I'm going to do less than. So if it's been less than 10 seconds, please show this instruction. And if I come in here, let's see if I create a pause. If I start again, you can see now I have tilt your head from side to side at the beginning of my effect. It lasts for 5 seconds, but it could happen anytime during those first 10 seconds. So I'm going to delete this because we don't need that. And basically, this is my effect. So I hope this was super useful and cool. I hope you feel inspired to create the type of effects within the pipeline of your current projects. You know, like if you're working for an event, if you're working on an interactive project that has a live component, how cool is to create an AR component that can be used to increase the awareness of that effect, but also educate people of what is possible on that effect. And it reaches also people that is outside the venue. So this is just a little taste of what you can do with tools like interactivity on Metaspark. So please let us know if you have any questions and if you have any ideas of something you would like to see on this series. Thank you. See you next time.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. If you're serious about taking your touch designer and interactive skills to the next level, I highly recommend you check out the Interactive and Immersive HQ Pro. It's the only educational resource and community of its kind for touch designer and interactive professionals. You can learn more by checking out the link in the description. And if you like this video, don't forget to hit that like button. And if you're new here, don't forget to hit subscribe and the little bell icon for more awesome free content.